fracture of the tibia in both legs, and the fibula in the right leg is fractured too. And as soon as the road's open, I'll take you to a hospital. In the meantime, you've got a lot of recovering to do. There is nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'm your #1 fan. My name is Annie Wilkes.
I think one of my clients, Paul Sheldon, might be in some kind of trouble.
You mean Paul Sheldon, the writer? Well, everybody sure likes those misery books.
They had it at the store, Paul.
They said he checked out last Tuesday. Isn't that a little strange?
I guess it was kind of a miracle you finding me.
In a way, I was following you.
You were following me?
Oh, Paul, I've read everything of yours, but the misery novels. You must be a good man. You could never have created such a wondrous, loving creature as Misery Chastain.
Very kind.
The presumption must now be that Paul Sheldon is dead.
You dirty bird. How could you? Misery Chastain cannot be dead.
Misery Spirit is still alive.
I don't want her spirit! I want her! And you murdered her!
You don't think he's dead, do you?
And don't even think about anybody coming for you, because I never called them. Nobody knows you're here. And you better hope nothing happens to me. Because if I die, you die. I know you've been out. Is this what you're looking for? Eventually, you'll come to accept the idea of being here.
Annie, whatever you're thinking about doing, please don't do it. Annie, for God's...
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best. God, I love you.
Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back. That was quite the trailer.
What a trailer. Oh, my goodness.
So good.
Very top-loaded, top-heavy. Yes, I love this movie.
So good.
Oh, my goodness.
I can't wait to talk about it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Everybody listening, my name's Pete.
And I'm Scott. And these are the movies that made us gay.
Yes, indeed.
Just us today. We don't have a guest.
No guest? Oh, well, it's fine. It's just us.
It's a very spooky night in Pasadena.
It is.
It's a little windy.
Howling.
It's a little chillier than normal. Some good, like, spooky podcasting weather.
Yes, indeed. I love it. I love it. Scott, why don't you talk a little bit about
Well, you probably
movie,
guessed it from that.
This oogie movie.
Great trailer that we just listened to. We watched Misery, directed by Rob Reiner, written by William Goldman, based on the novel by Stephen King from 1987, released November 30th, 1990.
Wow. Love it.
So good.
This movie is great. I remember seeing it when it first came out, being just kind of like mesmerized by these performances. I haven't seen it in a long time.
You don't remember watching this early in the pandemic? Because we watched this in like March of 2020.
I was probably asleep for the whole thing. I do not remember watching
Yeah, we
it.
watched this on a Sunday, kind of early in lockdown, kind of a good pandemic movie that I'm surprised that I didn't see more people post about.
Are you sure you didn't watch it without me?
No, because I remember I was doing my bracket for I was doing a fantasy bracket of the Best Actress winners, and I was ranking all of them. And I remember I had this on when I was doing it.
Maybe I was working on something else because I feel like I haven't seen it in ages, and I mean ages. Because what I specifically remember, or what I specifically thought as we were watching it this time, was just how like snappy it is, how just like utterly watchable as a movie this is.
Yeah, it's very well directed.
These performances are amazing. I mean, Kathy Bates deserved Best Actress.
I mean, I was thinking today at work that I think it's kind of silly to kind of say that this is my definitive favorite performance of all time, but I think Kathy Bates in this movie might be one of my favorite lead actresses' performances ever.
Right.
It's definitely my favorite of Best Actress.
Okay.
In kind of a thriller. It's probably more on the thriller side than horror.
Right,
But
yeah.
I mean, genre movies like that usually are not recognized. And when they do, it's like Rosamund Pike had no shot of actually winning that category in 2014.
For
Gone Girl.
Right.
But Kathy Bates did it.
Yeah, and I think this movie in particular, it's like it's got Stephen King. So it's just like it has baggage, right?
Yeah.
It has Stephen King, which I think people automatically just assume this is going to be a horror movie or it's a slasher, Kathy Bates was kind of an untested movie star.
Yeah, I mean, she did a lot of big plays on Broadway and theater, and I believe that she came at the request of William Goldman.
William Goldman, the screenwriter of this movie, who has worked together with Rob Reiner on The Princess Bride.
Yes.
Which is very interesting that he wrote The Princess Bride. And Rob Reiner as a director, I mean, that's a whole other thing that we can talk about too, in his Castle Rock production company.
I had forgotten that when the credits came on and you noted that. That I was like, well, that's not a Stephen King reference. Oh, it is a Stephen King reference.
Yeah. It's the town that they live in Stand By Me.
Yeah.
And which is unusual that it was not Derry or
Dairy Pictures.
No.
I guess
but
the Castle Rock has a better ring to it.
I'm saying the town in Stand By Me in the story.
Yeah. It's one of the major towns that you see called back a lot.
Right. He didn't tie it into a specific town already. He came up with this Castle Rock, which is a really evocative imagery. But Rob Reiner kind of, I mean, not known for directing comedies quite yet. He's got a very kind of like
I mean, he had a good run of movies in the 80s that he started with This Is Spinal Tap, a movie that I still have not seen. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can believe that.
The Princess Bride, people fucking love that movie. And also When Harry Met Sally, right? The year before Misery came out. Like, that is some range right there.
Yeah, I mean, The Princess Bride is a great movie. People fucking love that movie. Like, it's a piece of garbage.
But I was just saying is that like
Princess Bride and Princess Bride fans.
People just love that movie. Like,
yeah, they do. It's a great movie.
Like, people always say that's their favorite movie.
And it's a collaboration.
I love The Princess Bride
with William Goldman, who
wrote the novel and the screenplay.
Yeah. So he's a very interesting writer to bring along to a project like Misery. Rob Reiner is a very interesting director. And, what we got was this really cool adaptation. Is Misery a novella like Stand By Me, like The Body?
No.
Or is it a full book?
It's a full novel.
It's a full book.
Yep.
Okay. I've not read Misery.
Do you want to kind of begin this conversation with our personal relationships with Stephen King?
Sure.
Because Stephen King has said this is one of his favorite adaptations of his work. I think that he mentions like
Shawshank, it's one of the most faithful.
Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me as being two of his favorites, and he always mentions Misery. Right. Also Cujo. He really likes Cujo.
Oh, that's funny.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my mom has always been a very big reader, very avid reader, and she always read the big Stephen King books as they were released. So I remember as a kid, the house always having Stephen King books, and I just always remember their sheer size.
Yeah.
They were always super thick, but she always got the paperback because my mom didn't like carrying around a big old hardback, so she waited.
Understandable.
Excuse me. And so I remember, but I don't remember Misery. I remember it. I remember seeing that huge book, and I remember her reading it and just being like, I can't believe you're reading
that giant book. And also scary book covers. The paperback covers of it and Pet Sematary used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid.
Yes. And we also had The Stand, which was a very like not abstract, but like it had those weird characters.
It's kind of the thinker of his books.
Well, I'm talking about the cover.
Oh, sure.
The cover it wasn't scary, but it had these weird, like, Harlequin-y kind of, like, goblin guys that were in, like, this fighting position. And it looked very Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. And very interesting cover.
The cover for Misery is Paul in his wheelchair and Annie in, like shadow with the axe. Because in the book, she cuts his leg off with his foot. Yeah, so she's holding the axe.
Spoiler alert. The axe is a big imagery in the book cover. So what about you? Do you how far back do you go with Stephen King?
So I mean, I didn't read a lot of Stephen King when I was young. I think that I just read Carrie when I was in junior high, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I definitely remember watching the miniseries It. Mm-hmm. Loved The Shining when I was like in junior high. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of stuff like that, like the heavy hitters of Stephen King's catalog. Yeah. And I definitely remember the Stephen King miniseries, Rose Red, with Nancy Travis. So I remember sort of the night, like the multi-night miniseries of his work.
Well, I think it just kind of like opened the door. When that was successful, they were just like, bring them on, and they just started doing everything.
And, Rose Red wasn't until like the early 2000s, too.
Yeah, that was a lot later.
I didn't really get into reading Stephen King until my late 20s, that I downloaded the Audible app, and one of the first books that I listened to off that app a few years ago was It. It's like 72 hours long.
That's a very long audiobook.
And I really wanted to listen to it before the movie, and it's probably one of my favorite novels of all time. It's read by Steven Weber. Listeners, if you just want a good, just like many, many hours of listening, download the audiobook for It.
Steven Weber of Wings fame.
Yep.
He also was in the television adaptation for The Shining. He played Jack Torrance.
And then kind of through my Stephen King Audible phase, I listened to The Shining and Dolores Claiborne and a little bit of The Stand.
Okay.
And the audiobook for Dolores Claiborne is read by somebody from this movie. It is Frances
Sternhagen.
Yep. Frances Sternhagen reads the audiobook for it, and she's really good.
She plays the sheriff's wife in this movie.
Also,
she's really funny in this.
Bunny McDougal from Sex and the City.
Ah, yes.
Bunny
McDougal. What character is that from Sex and the City?
She was Kyle MacLachlan's mother.
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
So she was, what's her name's mother-in-law for very brief moments. Mm-hmm. Charlene. Am I right? Is that
Charlotte.
Charlene.
Charlotte. Charlene.
Yes. I was getting my Designing Women mixed up with my Sex in the City.
Understandable.
Charlene. I'm a Charlene, aren't we all? Mm-hmm. I'm actually not a Charlene. But I mean, Stephen King is one of those things that, especially in the 80s and 90s, it was just like an explosion of like film, television, all these adaptations of his work. And as a kid, you're just like fascinated by scary movies. And then also things like It and Stand By Me were just populated with kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now Stephen King also is known for like these crazy horror projects, and the horror aspects of his books and movies are all usually very supernatural in nature.
Yeah.
And the horror in Misery is not at all. It's very grounded in reality.
And I think
could happen.
It was a very personal book for Stephen King for that very reason, because just over obsessive Stephen King fans.
Right.
And just how sometimes an artist is just held prisoner by what they do. I'm sure that at the time, whenever Stephen King tried to write something different, he would have fans say, no, that is not what kind of a writer you are.
Right.
This is what kind of a writer you are.
Well, we won't delve too deep into the whole idea of that every protagonist in the Stephen King project is a troubled writer with
there's a lot of
with addiction problems. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess they say write what you know. He just turns all of his like demons figuratively into like literal, specters.
And when you see like interviews for Stephen King when they were optioning this book, that kind of the producers were shocked that it hadn't been optioned yet, just because Stephen King was very particular about this book in particular, that he really didn't want to sell the movie rights to it unless it was somebody that he really trusted. And Stephen King was a big Stand By Me fan, like I mentioned before, and that's pretty much what sold the movie.
Yeah. Stand By Me and also Shawshank Redemption, like you mentioned, not in line with what most people think of. I know a lot of people at the time when Stand By Me was released were just like shocked that it was a Stephen King project. Mm-hmm. It was a novella. It was a short story from a compilation. I think Skeleton Crew. I think people to this day sometimes, just find out. I was today years old when I realized Stand By Me was written by Stephen King. some of his most successful adaptations, people freaking love Shawshank Redemption.
Oh yeah, is it still the number one movie?
Yeah, on
user-rated movie on IMDb.
Yeah, maybe it probably fluctuates in the top 5.
A movie that my personal relationship is, I think it's good.
Yeah,
but I mean that shit's not getting close to my like.
You know who loves
top 50?
You know who loves Shawshank Redemption?
Straight bros,
straight dudes.
Yeah.
Ooh, they love it. They love it. They are Andy Dufresne, all of them. Which I don't know if that's a good thing. So yeah, it's very interesting that somebody who's so well known for horror, some of his other most like highly praised pieces are more psychological character pieces, things that can really happen as opposed to an interdimensional like spider.
And it's always interesting to compare the movie to the book to all of his adaptations. And I'm sort of in the camp for movies like The Shining. I prefer the movie over the book. I think the book is good, but I think that just kind of Stanley Kubrick does some really neat things with that adaptation.
Yeah, I agree. The book is a little dry. I enjoy The Shining. It was a very, very fascinating read. I'm glad I read it. But I much prefer would watch the movie again in a heartbeat over picking up the book again and starting it over.
Do you remember when
I read books multiple times.
Do you remember when we were driving to Montana and I put on The Shining audiobook and it was like, Campbell Scott in that sleepy voice, and at one point you're just like, we can't listen to this anymore.
I was going to drive
cliff drive off into the ravine.
Yeah, it was.
He's going to put me to sleep,
lulling me into a deep slumber. His voice is very soothing. If you suffer from insomnia, get the Shining audiobook. It will help you. Not that it's not shade by any means. I mean, maybe it is, but read it for yourself. Read it in your own voice. Campbell Scott was very to-state for my taste, but
it's no Steven Weber.
Oh no, not at all. So on to Misery from what year is this? 1990? 1990. I mean, practically the 80s.
Pretty much, yeah.
At this point. Kathy Bates, I think the conversation begins and ends with Kathy Bates.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Movie. But that said, when we did our revisit the other night, I was impressed by James Caan. And I was just kind of thinking, how did James Caan not crack the best actor lineup of 1990?
Right. Yeah.
Because he fully could have when you
really
look
weird.
at that top 5.
Yeah.
But I guess, you're right. Just sort of the conversation begins and ends with Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
That she just sort of upstaged him when it came to the Oscars.
Yeah. And he is really good, like you said. I think maybe there might be some issues with the character, which maybe for Oscar voters at the time might have bled into not wanting to...
Sure.
Because I have questions about Paul Sheldon.
Okay.
I mean...
Yeah. I mean, there's reasons why huge A-list actors of the 80s turned down this movie. William Hurt, Kevin Kline, Michael Douglas, Harrison Ford, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Richard Dreyfuss, Gene Hackman, and Robert Redford. And Warren Beatty said that he would do the movie if they sort of turned his character less passive. And when they refused to do that in the script, he recommended...
James Caan.
He recommended James Caan.
He's like, who's a little bitch who could take this passive shit? Yeah. Jimmy Caan. I hesitate to agree that Paul Sheldon is a passive character. His legs are...
Yeah, it's true.
His legs are fucking...
He really can't go anywhere.
Blown to oblivion. His legs were run over by a steamroller.
But just all of these
what
A-list...
What is he going to do?
But just all these A-list actors that were just turned off that they had to do this whole movie sitting in a bed.
Sure, I mean that's probably why they were. That's probably why at the end of the day they turned it down, because it is he is not really moving around that much. But I mean, another actor could say that it's a chance to show off
a good character piece.
Yeah, show off your skills, and give us a performance from being strapped to a bed, which I think James Caan did very well. But I guess we have to just kind of set up the story that Paul Sheldon, again, prolific writer, struggling with addiction issues, many, many demons.
I have a lot of...
sounds like Stephen King.
I have a lot of questions about a man like Paul Sheldon writing these Civil War romance novels? Are they kind of set around the Civil War?
Think they're probably earlier than that.
Earlier than that? Okay. So, yeah, I used to work at a bookstore, Barnes & Noble, for almost 10 years. So I used to deal with the romance crowd a lot. Getting calls every week of just looking up books, getting the same women calling you and doing ship-to-homes for them, that you would sort of develop these weird relationships with these women over the phone of just like, I need this
Annie
book.
Wilkes types.
These weird Annie Wilkes types. I mean, I would hope that they're not quite as psychotic as Annie Wilkes. But I mean, I definitely was around that crowd. And fun little fact about the romance novel industry, many of them are written by gay men. And they use pseudonyms as women.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Yeah, my biggest question was how many romance novelists are these burly straight men?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because James Caan, to me, gives off a persona of being like a tough guy.
I mean,
right?
he's Sonny from The Godfather.
Sonny Corleone. James Caan just seems like a toughie, a baddie, somebody that I wouldn't want to mess with.
Kind of the heavy.
And yeah, when you see the covers, especially of of the Misery books, they're amazing. First of all,
they're pretty out of control.
They're just like standard romance novel covers, and yeah, it's just very interesting that that's the area they went into. I think maybe it would have been too cute, too precious if he was a horror writer.
Sure, it would have been a little too on the nose.
But also, they have to give the story beat that his number one fan is so obsessed with his character that is through all of this book series. And I think they say that there's 8 books in the series, and the lead character, her name is Misery Chastain.
Misery Chastain. Yep.
It's a great character name. I mean, it's a weird-ass name. Misery is a weird name. Why would anybody name their child Misery? But, it is also a very romance novel name.
Definitely,
it fits. It fits into, soaps kind of area. So Misery Chastain. And he's written 8 Misery novels. He feels like he is in a box. He feels like
trapped by him.
He's trapped by
in his
novels.
conversations with Lauren Bacall.
And the latest edition in the Misery series,
it's about to come out,
is about to be released, and it is The Death of Misery.
Yeah.
And his not his editor, his agent, his literary agent, is played by Lauren Bacall.
And that smoker voice.
I mean, it's
that Lauren Bacall smoker voice.
It is 1990 Lauren Bacall, and it's like it's a cameo. It's stunt casting. It's not a cameo. It's a little bit more than that.
Most of her scenes are on the phone.
Scenes are in an office set, just like, with a huge window, just kind of pacing back and forth. But it's kind of iconic that she's in this movie as this literary agent, just kind of talking up Paul Sheldon about, how great this new edition is going to be.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the book, or of the movie, we set up that Paul has just finished writing his first non-misery novel.
I think that he based it on his childhood, I think.
Sure. And he's completed the manuscript. It's untitled, and he's typed out untitled. He's, signed the manuscript in pencil, put it in his leather portfolio. What do you call those? A portfolio or an attaché, a leather attaché portfolio, what have you. And he gets,
and he always finishes all of his books at the same winter lodge.
Yes,
that he types on a typewriter. He does not use
in Colorado.
He doesn't use like a computer.
In Colorado.
Oh, I'm not sure where it's set.
I think it's in Colorado. Yep. Because that's where the Overlook is, and it's just this very, very snowy.
But yeah, he has this routine that he
area
opens up a bottle of Dom, smokes one cigarette, just one
Dom Perignon, just one because he quit.
Yep,
and he gives it to himself as a treat. And Oh my God. And when he lights that cigarette with the wooden match, he does this thing that's so fucking Jimmy Caan. I can't deal with it. He has the match in the one hand and he flicks it and he lights it with his own damn thumb.
Yeah.
I love that
Your
shit.
grandpa could do that.
And it's like, Jimmy Caan was like, I got this. Give me the damn match. I got it. You don't got to put anything on my finger. I can light that motherfucker.
I have a lot of questions about Paul with his Mustang in the middle of winter without snow tires.
Well,
driving way too fast.
If he wrote an entire novel, maybe he's been in, wherever, Silver Creek, Colorado for a couple of weeks.
I took it that he was probably there for about 5 days just finishing it up.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. But, the snow can come in pretty quickly. But again, I'm getting the sense that he's like this New York type, this New York guy. He's a writer, but still he's from the East Coast.
He'll go out to the mountains without snow tires.
There's a little line later on in the movie when they're talking about the characters cursing, and he said, "There's street kids. I was a street kid, So I'm feeling like, okay, they're giving a little bit of like James Caan ness to this character. So yeah, he doesn't know from snow tires. He just takes this Mustang, this blue Mustang.
And if he had snow tires, we wouldn't have any of the movie.
I know, then the movie would be over. Yeah, so he's he drives off, and after he's finished, he's done his whole routine. He's very particular about his routine, and he just drives away, and he's by himself at this lodge, And again, it's like very Stephen King vibes. It's this like lodge that's like locked away from the rest of civilization after the snow comes in, because of its location. It's just very, treacherous to get there and to get away from there, very much like The Shining. So I think it is Colorado. I think they mentioned it at one point. But as he leaves, the snow gets worse and worse. Is it Rescue Me that's like playing? It's like this Motown song that's playing on his car radio.
Oh, sure.
I think it's
I mean, I think he's just a shitty driver. I think he's just driving down this road way too fast with ice.
Well, the snow starts pouring. Does snow pour? Do you say pouring for snow?
Snow falls.
Yeah, but like rain falls. But when rain falls really heavily, you say it's pouring outside.
Storm.
Sure.
Storming.
So the snow starts coming down a lot more heavily, like immediately as he's driving, and it just starts, dropping on him. And but yeah, compounded on top of the fact that he's not a very good driver. He just rolls his Mustang into the snow, and you just see this shadowy figure with the crowbar.
Yeah, and Annie lifts him right up.
She cracks him out of this car like a can of tuna.
Yep.
With this crowbar. She I don't know. I mean, maybe if, you get that weird strength. Yeah, so we get this shadowy figure, saves him, and you're just like, who is it? But at least he's being saved. And then,
we get the whole setup of Annie Wilkes.
Yes. And I love this character, Annie Wilkes.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with this woman in this performance.
Yeah. It's amazing. Her performance is great, but just everything about it, like the styling of her, the dialogue, the very specific dialogue, the way she talks, the way she refers to, to people, and the type of language she uses, all of it. It just gives you such a clear
idea
picture
of who this woman is.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you this really clear picture of the kind of person that she is. And you're like, okay, I kind of know that kind of person. I've met people like that before, or whatever. Right off the bat, to me, she dresses like the nuns at St. Stephen's Martyr Elementary School.
Sure.
Where
kind of long denim dresses, kind of in like an apron top.
Well, they're like the jumper style.
Yeah.
A denim jumper that's like down past your like to your ankles, with like a striped turtleneck underneath, or maybe just like a long skirt, or maybe just some like dockers, but like maybe like a navy blue docker and like a cardigans, lots of cardigans.
Yeah.
You know, very modest, I would say, very modest, very demure. When she does wear trousers, it seems like it's days that she's probably working, you know,
Where
doing
she's
things
doing
outside.
something outside. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, she'll wear skirts or long dresses, things like that. Very like modest hairstyle.
Yeah, kind of just like a short bobbed hair to the probably right to her shoulder.
And first thing she says, I mean, iconic dialogue to Paul Sheldon. I'm your number one fan.
I'm your number one fan.
Love it.
Yep.
I love it. So good.
I mean, Millie, our friend Millie, talked about this movie on their podcast, and Millie kind of talked about it being a kind of an interesting take on a Psycho Biddy movie.
Yes.
Which I love. It's kind of something that I didn't really know when I was younger about this material, and just the Annie character, and just sort of looking at it through that lens. It's just so interesting of where Annie fits in sort of the grand scheme of this idea that you've seen for decades in cinema.
Well, we've talked a little bit about Psycho Biddy and the hagsploitation genre in the past.
We talked about Baby Jane.
And whatever happened to Baby Jane. But can you explain a little bit to the kids Psycho Biddy or hagsploitation? I know hagsploitation is maybe a little offensive, so we'll stick with Psycho Biddy.
Psycho Biddy.
But how would you explain that to
I mean,
I
think kind of the simplest definition of it is just sort of a woman on the verge. That, like, she's getting older, and she's just trying to relate to the rest of society, and she just really can't.
Yeah. I want to talk about, you know, Kathy Bates as an actor. Again, this is kind of early foray into movies. She's a big theater person at this point, but not very big in movies. She gets this movie, she wins Best Actress, but the character is Annie Wilkes, and Kathy Bates is a more traditionally built woman.
Yeah, I mean, she just
I would say. And there was a lot of, like, you know, on the Saturday Night Live Misery 2 sketch, it was played by Roseanne.
Oh my gosh, I had not seen that until we watched that.
I'm sure I should.
It was so
Misery
no,
2.
I had never seen that. The sketches Dana Carvey and the church lady and his number one fan.
He's retiring.
He was retiring the church lady.
And,
yep.
And Annie Wilkes is back, and she's the church lady's number one fan.
Mr. Carvey. Are you waking up?
Where am I?
You had a terrible accident, but you're going to be all right.
Who are you?
I'm your number one fan. I pulled you out of your car. I left Mr. Lovitz. I thought it would be best.
But, you know, so they get Roseanne to play Kathy Bates. And, you know, it was always the butt of jokes. You know, Janeane Garofalo had a whole bit of people thinking that she was Kathy Bates. And Rosie has whole bits of people saying
Rosie, that's mentioned it in numerous movies, I feel.
Yeah.
We were just watching Beautiful Girls, and there's a little snip of dialogue that's probably taken from Rosie's stand-up.
Well, I think she just said, wouldn't it be funny if this character says I look like Kathy Bates? And she says it in The Nanny and things like that. And it's like, oh, haha, shade, you know, you look like Kathy Bates, this like dowdy fat woman. Kathy Bates was 41.
Yeah.
She was not an old woman.
No, not at all.
She was 41. And the thing is, it's the character. She doesn't have any makeup on, and she's got this like frumpy haircut and like dumb clothes and all that. So it's like, that sucks that for so long people were just like, oh, Kathy Bates, haha, you look like Kathy Bates. But it's like, dude, that's pretty messed up. She was 41 years old. She's younger than I am, playing Annie Wilkes, and like just got so much grief for years about just being this frumperina.
She was just given
like,
so much grief just because she was so regular looking.
Yeah.
She just looked like somebody's aunt.
Yeah. Yeah.
She didn't look like a movie star.
Yeah. But, you know, it served the character really well. It made you believe that she could, drag Paul Sheldon away from this fiery wreckage. It was not fiery. But, right off the bat, she's like, you're safe. You're in my home. The roads are out. The power's out. The phones are out.
And it just so
Nothing's
happens
working.
I used to be a nurse. And
I'm a
I have
nurse.
all of this shit that I've stolen from the hospital.
She says, I am a nurse.
Yep.
She's like, I'm a nurse. Like, I got you, fam. Like, let's get this together.
Those shots of Paul's legs.
His, like, Jimmy Dean sausage legs. Yeah.
What the hell went down in that car?
Just crumpled him up, man. The whole dashboard and steering wheel and everything came down on those legs. She said he had compound fractures in both legs.
Yikes.
Right? And then
And a compound fracture is like where your bone sticks out?
Compound fracture is where the bone breaks through the skin. Both legs. And a broken tibia in one leg and a broken fibia in the other leg, and I don't know what the hell. And they look awful. They look like Jimmy Dean sausage, breakfast sausage before you cook it. Like, that's what they look like, each one of them. His feet are all gnarled and disgusting. And she's got like splints made. She just like has them wrapped up.
Yeah, kind of like DIY. She's got like a wooden spoon in there and like pieces of wood and just like ace bandages and wrapped up. And he also has a broken arm. That's something about his arm was out of its socket, and she said she had to jam it back in there. She's like, I popped it back in. I'm like, oh, geez. But yeah, just him in the bed is just like, holy crap, this is insane. And she's just like feeding him these pills. Take these pills, take these pills, take these pills. So I always forget about that. It sets up that Annie knows that Paul writes there.
Yes.
So she's
his number one fan.
She's had this stakeout.
Yeah.
Of where he finishes up his novels.
Yes.
Because she knows even what room that he writes in.
Well, she even
when the
says,
light's on.
She even said, because he's like, oh, I was driving in the snow, whatever. And she even says, I was following you.
So
I saw you leave.
She's been waiting for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Of a moment like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess so, because she pretty much followed him out of the hotel, out of the Silver Creek, and was just like, all right. I don't know if she was going to follow him back to New York or what, but when he did veer off the road, she was just like, all right, now's my chance. So, it's very interesting that she gives him these pills, right? And she says they're called like Novril or something. And I think in the book, there's like more of a reference to him like getting addicted to the painkillers. Mm-hmm. Right. But in this one,
it sets up pretty early that he's not taking them.
Yes. I was going to say in this one, he kind of gives himself this. Paul kind of decides, I'm not going to he gets his wits about him a lot faster in this. Like he just kind of comes to his senses pretty quickly and decides to stop taking the pills because he's just like, I don't even know what the hell this is. And he rips a little hole in the bed with his fork and like jams him in there. Yeah, so Paul kind of is a little wise to like, this lady's kind of cuckoo.
And he knows that for as long that he's been there, he hasn't talked to his daughter yet over the phone. Mm-hmm. So he knows that people on the outside are wondering where he is.
Yeah.
And Annie's not really doing her part to make sure... Just to kind of let people know that he's okay.
Right. Well, especially because at the beginning, she's very, like, wishy-washy. She'll be like, oh, I went into town and I, like, called blah, blah, blah. And he's like, so the phones are working.
And also, the roads are closed. When you look outside, it's a beautiful day out. Yeah. How are the roads still closed?
Yeah, and there's no electricity and there's no phones in, like, this entire town, Because she's constantly saying, like, well, the road to town's open, but not to the hospital. Mm-hmm. It's like, but not to the hospital, though, So he's kind of like, right off the bat, just a little bit like, oh, I don't know what's going on with her. And then she has this really cool way of, like, not swearing.
Yeah.
Which I love.
I mean, it's pretty iconic.
And she says that things make her feel all oogie. She doesn't want you to feel all oogie, and I love that. And just.
like these little Annie Wilkesisms. I mean, it's right. I mean, when she reads his manuscript and she was sort of previewing his new character dialogue, and she has her big meltdown about swearing.
Right. So she does. She does initially say, like, "Hey, I pulled you out of the car, and I also saw that you had this manuscript in there." So you're actually right, because you said that, like, she had this whole thing planned out, that she was even stalking him at the hotel. So she knew he was there to finish a manuscript. Because otherwise, what is she like? She yanks him out of the car, and then what is she like? Ducking inside the car, like fishing around for everything.
Also,
no,
it was an early shot that she puts the manuscript in her coat.
Yeah,
because she doesn't want it to get ruined.
Yeah, so she knew it was there beforehand. She didn't just see it, or because otherwise she would have had to crawl in there and find it or whatever. So yeah, she totally knew it was there, and she's just like, "Oh, I saw this."
And kind of in the weird Annie Wilkes thought process, has like God made this happen? That like this is a sign that he crashed his car, and I have to go save him.
Yeah,
because God wants Paul Sheldon all to myself.
To me, yeah,
yes,
yeah. She has these. She says things to him like, you know, I spoke to God, and he said that, you know, I'm going to do this, and he said that
he doesn't want you writing that manuscript.
Well, yes. So she reads the manuscript of the new book, Untitled, and at first she's just like, "Oh, it's wonderful. Obviously, you wrote it. You're the best. You're the best writer on earth, blah, blah, blah. You're so talented. I'm like scum at your feet." But then she's like, "But, you know," and then she starts going off about the swearing. And she says what does she say? I forgot what she says. It's like not noble or something.
We'll do an audio poll of that scene. It's great.
The profanity bothers you.
It has no nobility.
These are slum kids. I was a slum kid. Everybody talks like that.
They do not. What do you think I say when I go to the feed store in town? "Oh, now, Wally, give me a bag of that effing pig feed and 10 pounds that bitchly cow corn." And in the bank, do I tell Mrs. Bollinger, "Oh, here's one big bastard of a check. Give me some of your Christing money"? There, look there. See what you made me do?
Well, I love when he's like, "That's how people talk." And then she's like, "No, people don't talk like that." And then she starts swearing, but she swears all wrong. And she says, like, bitchly.
Yeah. I kind of love that, though.
Bitchly. She just swears completely incorrect. And I love it so good.
Man, this performance is incredible. And I mean, just how Kathy plays her as just this kind of weird, fully rounded person that she really sells this character.
Yeah.
I mean, even I feel like without making it too broad, like she goes broad, but she knows when to rail it in, which is important as an actor.
Right. Because she has these moments of mania, right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, for the most part, she's just a little weird. She's just a little kooky.
There's just these peaks and valleys of this character and her mind state.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is, like, for the most part, she's just like a kind of a dorky lady. Just like, "Oh, you know, I have this farm and I love Misery. Misery's my favorite character and I've read all your books and blah, blah, blah." You're like, okay, cool. That's nice. And she loves Liberace and like all of that. But then every now and then when something rubs her the wrong way,
you get some real eyebrow raised moments with her.
Yeah. And the swearing really pushes her over the edge, and everything becomes bitchly after that, and I love it. And so that's kind of one of the first times we really see how mean she can be. And I'm not talking about when she starts swearing and spilling the tomato soup all over the bed, but when she comes in with the manuscript and the whole ass Weber.
Ooh, She makes him torch it.
Drags that whole ass Weber grill into the room.
And you're just thinking, like, Paul, can you just not, like, why didn't you not write this on a fucking Macintosh?
I know. They fully had
it was readily available in the late 80s.
In 1990. Yeah. And I love how he plays it off. He's just like, "Oh, well, it's fine because
I got copies
everywhere."
But she knows all this information about him because she's read every single magazine interview, every single like newspaper write-up on Paul.
Yeah.
So she knows all of these details.
Yeah.
That he only has one master copy.
Yeah.
Because he's superstitious.
And that kind of shit, that kind of knowledge about celebrities at that time was really hard to
You
come by.
really had to do your legwork. It's not like you could look up on Wikipedia.
No.
It's not like you could look up on the Paul Sheldon Wikipedia page.
Yeah. That was when like you could write into a fan club and get a newsletter, a hard copy of a newsletter, you know, and like maybe get like a signed photo and that kind of stuff. And getting the magazines and clipping them out and all that stuff. That was legwork that you had to put in to be that level of like super fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I ever really had the energy to do that for anybody in particular.
I feel like I was into stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I wasn't doing the legwork for all of that.
Yeah. I think my sister was in some like fan clubs, like British pop fan clubs. I think she might have been in the official Pearl Jam fan club.
Oh, very
which is
cool.
not British pop, but I think she was in the official Pearl Jam fan. I think because I do remember her writing to a couple of bands to get some stuff, but I never did anything like that. And I wanted to, you know, you would see things about like writing fan letters and stuff like that, but I was always like, I don't know, where do you send it? Like Hollywood, USA.
Hollywood, USA.
And just put a stamp on it. Like, I don't know. So yeah, it even required like work to figure out how to do those things, where to go to, where to write to, you know. And Annie Wilkes was just that kind of you know, tenacious person to do all that shit. And she called him out. She's like, you do not have any copies of this. This is your only copy, and you're going to burn it.
Yep.
And when she's walking around the bed talking,
and she's sort of talking with she's sort of talking with her hands, and as she's doing it, the lighter fluid for the barbecue is starting to get on the bed.
Just gesticulating wildly.
Kathy's
with her
great
hands.
in that scene.
Yeah. And it's funny because at first it looks like she's absent-mindedly gesticulating wildly with her hands and the lighter fluid's flying everywhere. But then as it goes on, it is deliberate. And she's just like squeezing it and pouring it on the bed. And she puts the box of matches on his chest. And she's like, light it up. Light it up. And he's like, you fucking piece of shit. And he does it. And he lights it. And I love that it just goes up in flames. She's just like, ooh, heavens to Betsy.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think that I would light a lit barbecue in our living room.
Hell no. Oh my God. No way. Everything in this room would go up in flames.
Also, kind of part of the reasons why I think a movie like this has aged so well is that just sort of internet culture has gone such a long ways with fan relationships with material.
Yeah.
Let it be for like Star Wars, crazy Star Wars fans that claim that they know the series better than their own creator.
Yeah.
That's kind of where it starts to get crazy, is when fans start to be like, oh no, I know this material better than you do.
Yeah, yeah. Or just thinking that, you know, artists or creators or whatever owe something to them as like fans or listeners or readers or
just sort of
watchers. Yeah. It's very tricky nowadays. But I also think that being a super fan is looked on a little easier nowadays. Like if you were a fanatic, you know, quote unquote, even in the 90s, it was just like, all right, calm down, like whatever, you know, you're a fanatic. But I feel like nowadays,
with like nerd culture just sort of being embraced a little more,
yeah, you can be a fanatic of multiple things, you know, multiple properties, and it's just like, okay, you're just a super fan and you have all their whatever. But at that time, if you were a fanatic of anything and you just like knew all this trivia or whatever, you're kind of looked at like a weirdo, you know. So it just kind of lends this character of Annie. It's just like, oh, she's one of those people that doesn't have anything else going on, so she's just like this kind of super fan or whatever of Paul Sheldon. She's also a prolific collector of ceramic animals.
Oh, yes. All of the art direction of Annie's house is so much fun to look at. It's just like, just all of the shit that's in her house, from her framed Liberace photo.
Yeah. I mean, she loves Liberace.
And I love that's just like
it's a beat.
That's just like a little character note, is that this type of woman just loves Liberace.
Yeah, yeah. So, Paul eventually, when he gets his legs start healing, he gets access to this wheelchair to rewrite. Well, no, not to rewrite the new novel. It's to rewrite. He's gonna sort of make. He's gonna make a sequel. He's gonna make his 9th book, but he's gonna bring Misery back from the dead. Okay, so because all this is happening at once, she's saved him, she's drugging him up, she's nursing him back to health. She hates the Untitled, makes him destroy it, and then at this very moment, Misery Part 8 has just dropped at the local, general store. Because it is a general store. I love it. It's like one of those stores where the guy sells everything.
You can go in for your winter boots, pick up a book.
And romance novels. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she reads it in a night because she's one of those. And see, I still have the stigma. She reads it in a night. And the next morning she comes in and flips the fuck out that Misery's killed off, right? And he's trying to explain it to, and it's the thing is, Paul knows that she's off her rocker. So he's not going to go I was trapped, I was in a box.
He's not going to give his artist justification to her.
He's oh no,
a lot of people died in
childbirth.
Childbirth a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all this kind of stuff, trying to explain to Annie why Misery, the person, died and not why,
Do you know what this reminds me of? Do you remember when the last season of Game of Thrones ended and there were all of those petitions going around the internet just to refilm the season?
Oh yeah.
Just
scrap it,
just
start all
scrap
over.
it all. Just scrap it all and start over.
It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. Totally. Very.
It reminded me a lot of that.
Very that. Mm-hmm. Very that. We love when she loses her mind for that. But I mean, my favorite blow up is coming up because she sets up a little workstation for him to type and to,
She gets out the card table.
Yeah, gets the card table and says, "You're going to write a sequel to this, and you're going to figure it out, but Misery's alive. I don't care how she's alive.
That's my only note.
Just figure it the fuck out, You're a writer. You're a great writer." She's like, "I'm sure you'll think of something." Right? And he does, and it's amazing what he does. Something about a bee sting. I don't something about a bee sting putting her in a coma, a death-like trance. I don't know what's going on there. But one of the original things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, he just sort of Misery's alive. She just never died.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the Bob Newhart thing of it was all a dream.
Yeah.
And Annie's not having it.
She's not having it at all. And that's when she goes into the diatribe about the serials. She starts talking about going to the movie serials. She calls them one thing, Chapter Place. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And he goes, cliffhangers. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my favorite was Rocket Man. And once it was a no-brakes chapter. The bad guys stuck him in a car on a mountain road, knocked him out, and welded the door shut and tore out the brakes and started him to his death. And he woke up and tried to steer and tried to get out, but the car went off a cliff before he could escape. And it crashed and burned, and I was so upset and excited. And the next week, you better believe I was first in line. And they always start with the end of the last week. And there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here comes the cliff. And just before the car went off the cliff, he jumped free. And all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!"
Mr. Man. She starts calling him Mr. Man, But this is her way of putting him down, calling him Mr. Man. It's all right. And that's when she goes on her big diatribe. He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car.
When I Snapchatted our friend Lex that we were doing this movie, and that was the thing that he replied back.
He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car.
Out of the cock-a-doodie car.
Yeah, that. Oh my god, that.
If you were gonna do a drag lip sync on Stephen King night at the Offbeat bar,
you have to.
You got to do.
Yeah,
you got to do this monologue.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's when she's just you're a great writer. You're going to figure this shit out, but it's got to be better than this, man.
Oh, now I'm thinking of the Roseanne sketch that look what I got at the store. I got this wig
and these glasses. Misery 2, you guys. It's kind of hard to find. You found like some weird bootleg.
I'll cut some of it into the episode.
Isn't that special?
Oh, I don't mean to wake you, but I went into town and look what I found. A wig and some glasses just like the church lady wears.
Annie, are you sure the phones aren't working? You know, I really should call Lauren in New York. You know, I have a show to do. But
I also got the newspaper that has a review of your show in it. I'm going to go in the other room and read it. Oh, I just can't wait.
Oh, I miss the church lady. But I love when he like sends her on these like not wild goose chases, but he's like
he just wants to get her out of the house.
Yeah, gotta get her out of the house.
I need the right paper. I love how Kathy Bates plays her reactions that the nicest paper or the most expensive one is not what Paul wanted.
Yeah, she's like, what's wrong? I got you the most expensive paper, and he's like, smudges, and different paper stocks really there's some really shiny ones that smudge a lot. They're crazy. But yeah, so when he sends her off to go get more paper, that's when he escapes into the house, and that's when he starts seeing all of her stuff, right? And that's when he sees the ceramic animals.
Her crazy I think that he really notices what's in the book until later on in the movie.
That's the second time.
But Annie has a scrapbook.
Yes. It says memories.
She has a scrapbook of her fucked up past.
Yeah. So crazy. I love when he's in the living room and he's like, the phone. And he goes over to the phone and starts dialing it, and
there's nothing
happens. And he picks up the phone and it's empty. It's just a shell.
Annie took out the phone on the case that he would get out because she knew it might happen.
But I'm like, we have a phone that's not plugged into anything.
Yeah, it's true. Yep. Our landline hasn't worked for a good 8 years.
It's just sitting there. It looks cute. It's a pink princess phone.
When we did have that landline actually plugged in and working, the only people that called it were always just telemarketers.
Yeah, it was all just garbage.
Yep.
Who's calling us on a landline that no one has a number to? So yeah, Annie's house is crazy. She mentioned to him about a husband, and I think she mentioned that he left her.
Yeah.
I think she says he left her. And that she's got this farm. But the moment when he's out in this wheelchair, he's thrown himself on the floor to crawl across the kitchen to try and get out the back door. He's not even in the wheelchair anymore.
It's like his Blanche moment from Baby Jane, where she's
really
trying
is.
to get down the stairs.
Yeah, it really is. And she pulls up to the house, and he books it to get back in the chair, back in the room, lock the door from the inside with this paper clip or bobby pin or whatever. And it's super tense and crazy. And she's just you're covered in perspiration. I love when she says covered in perspiration. Oh, and then she says your color is erratic.
Well, she sort of apologizes for her big blow up that she slammed the paper on his legs. So even kind of Annie does admit that I have a pretty bad temper.
Yeah.
And it's probably why not a lot of people like me.
Yeah. He grabbed a big packet of the pills to hide them and hoard them.
Yeah.
And he has a first, idea to drug Annie, but that kind of fails because she's clumsy.
They have a nice dinner together listening to the Liberace records, and she spills the wine.
Yes.
Yep.
When she made meatloaf with Spam to give it a
little zip. Yep.
And when she made him breakfast, there was 2 little Spam patties on there. I noticed that the first time because she gave him that first, and I was like, "Oh, look, she gave him Spam with breakfast," and then she made the meatloaf with Spam. I was like, "Oh my god, I love it."
Yeah,
I love Annie Wilkes. Very interesting.
Do you know what kind of Annie Wilkesisms remind me of you a little bit? You mentioned her ceramic figurines. When she figures out that Paul's been out because everybody knows that the little penguin faces due south.
Yeah, obviously.
And you're someone, too, that, like, if you were to do something to, like, you always know when the cats fuck up the Legos.
Well, yeah, of course.
Always.
Because they're broken.
Because they're broken, and just, like, the littlest thing in the apartment that's been moved, you would notice it. Me, on the other hand, not saying that I'm, like, Bette Midler in Outrageous Fortune, that just, like... My
it always looks like this.
My entire apartment is just chaos. But I usually don't think about stuff like that, just because I just tend to just sort of live in the moment, and I don't really observe just surroundings as better as you.
Well,
I guess
I grew up in a house with a lot of people.
Okay,
where you would often leave a room and not come back to it the way it was when you left it. Because you had so many siblings and grandparents and parents in the house. So, you know, when you come from this kind of environment of not really taking ownership of things because everything was everybody's.
Yeah.
When you do get stuff that's yours, I'm just like, what the hell, man? Why don't these damn cats leave my freaking Legos pointed in the direction that they were left it? So there's that. But, you know, also, the penguins need to face due south.
And this is what leads us into Annie just breaking,
well, she
breaking both those ankles.
She figures out that that he's been out, so she's just
I forget that it takes her a little bit to figure that out. He gets out twice. I thought that she initially did it sooner.
Yeah, no, he gets out twice. Yeah. Because the second time he gets out is when he sees her scrapbook and when he sees all of her clippings of like...
So she used to be a nurse. She worked the night shift. She worked the graveyard at the hospital. And she mentions that she started reading his books right when she separated from her husband, and she used to work a lot. She worked at nights, and she would read a lot, and that's how she discovered the misery books.
She said it's very lonely working the night shift.
So this whole, like, backstory, that's very... like, you just get it from the newspaper clippings. You don't know a lot about it.
Yes.
That all of these kids all of these babies start to die at the hospital.
Well, not only that, but a nursing student dies mysteriously. She falls to her death. It seems like Annie's husband actually dies.
Yeah.
And didn't leave her. He died under mysterious circumstances, and another nursing student, and then as we get to the end, we start to see that like patients that are presumably under her care, and then infants in the hospital start dying. And it seems like she's just questioned, and then it seems like she actually did.
There was a whole trial.
Yeah.
And somewhat of a media scandal about it, because there were headlines about her.
Yes. Where she's referred to as Dragon Lady. I love it. I love it. That's a good one. Yeah, so he's just like, holy crap. All the while, the sheriff in town.
Oh, I love the sheriff scenes. I think that the sheriff scenes with him and his wife trying to figure out what happened to Paul are so endearing.
Very charming. Yes. The sheriff is played by Richard Farnsworth.
Richard Farnsworth got an Oscar nomination late in his career for a David Lynch movie. He's in like the family-friendly Disney David Lynch movie.
The Straight Story. From 1999. Rated G.
Yep. It's like David Lynch was like, I'm making a G-rated Disney movie.
An old man makes a long journey by lawnmower to mend his relationship with an ill brother.
But yeah,
it's with Sissy Spacek and Richard Farnsworth, and Richard Farnsworth was nominated for Best Actor. Right?
I love Richard Farnsworth and his relationship with his wife.
Yes, very charming, very cute. Frances Sternhagen, like you said, she plays Bunny in Sex and the City.
Kind of like serving as his deputy Kind of like it's a short-staffed like sheriff station, so his wife sort of has to chip in.
Yeah, it's just like a little town. Like the town itself, like when they get to, the general store and all that, it doesn't look like there's much there. It looks like it's one street with a couple of shops, and then the lodge probably. And yes, I get Frances Sternhagen mixed up with another actress. She was in the Psycho
and also Mrs. Doubtfire
remake, and also Mrs. Doubtfire.
Frances Sternhagen was also in The Mist, so she was in another big Stephen King movie. She's one of the characters that makes it out of the supermarket in The Mist, in that bummer of an ending.
What?
Yeah,
she's in the truck with them?
Yeah, she's in the truck with them.
I just watched them.
Yep.
I didn't just watch it. It was like a year ago, but still.
That was the first time I watched it, too. It was with you.
Wow. I don't even remember that that's her in there.
So kind of like, I think that this actress just lends herself to a Stephen King universe really well.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I mistake her often for Anne Haney, who, like you said, is in Miss Doubtfire. She's in Liar Liar.
She's in a really good episode of The Golden Girls, too.
Which one is that?
It's the one where Dorothy has to go in for surgery.
Oh, okay. And Dorothy's just like freaking out.
And she meets this woman that's kind of gone through this a lot, and she kind of gives Dorothy a little pep talk.
Yes.
We talked about this on our Psycho episode.
Oh, right.
Yep.
That's true. That's true. When we were talking about Anne Haney and not Frances Sternhagen. So all those scenes are really endearing, and makes it all the more kind of jarring.
Oh my gosh. When Annie blows him away,
oh my god!
I'm still shocked by that scene.
Crazy.
Of when he kind of puts it together that he could be over at Annie Wilkes' house because she does read his books that he just found out, and I love kind of the detective work that he buys the Misery novels just because he wants to get in the headspace of a reader or of Paul.
Yeah.
Like, I love that just, old-timey detective work.
Yeah, because the wife is like, well, what are you going to find out in there? Like, what is that? And even me as a viewer, I'm like, yeah, dude, seriously, what are you going to get out of that? I don't get it. But what he gets is a quote. It's a line of dialogue from Misery. And he sees that quote again Annie in a Annie Wilkes newspaper clipping or something.
That's right, because he does a little he looks up about Annie.
He's like, when he reads the quote, he's like, I remember this quote. Somebody said it. Where did I hear this quote?
It's
before?
about judging.
Yeah, it's about judgment or something.
Judgment, yeah.
And Annie said it when she was on trial for these murders. And when he's like, okay, she's quoting Misery back in the day, so she knows these books. She knows this writer, this author, this material. So that's when he puts it together.
And he knows that she must go into this little trading post to get books when she gets her feed and stuff.
Yeah.
And he just talks to the shopkeep of, have you seen Annie Wilkes buying any of these books?
Yeah, and he tips him off that she's bought
paper. Many kind of unusual
paper.
things, and one of them being paper.
Yeah, reams of paper. What the hell is she going to need reams of paper for?
Just kind of follows this lead over to Annie's house.
Yeah.
Annie puts Paul in the basement when she sees his truck come in.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because Paul sees him pull up to the farm, and immediately he's like, oh shit, and then Annie's right there next to him.
Yeah.
Jabs him in the arm.
You almost feel like you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have to catch up to him once she wheels Paul out of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, because she just gives him a sedative to knock him out. But she doesn't give him enough. Because he starts waking up.
I mean, Jimmy Caan's is a big dude.
Yeah.
He's a big strapping guy.
Yeah. And again, she got him down those stairs. Before Richard Farnsworth gets to the door, she gets him down the stairs and the wheelchair and gets back up the stairs. And she's just like, hey, hi.
I love that Richard Farnsworth, once he gets in the house, kind of just starts to look around, even without her.
Yeah. Well, he tries to, lose her, too, in the house and to look around and all that. And she's acting weird. She's just acting You know,
She's being a little too nice.
yeah, she's being weird. She's being suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. And yeah, he's there just long enough for Paul to kind of come out of the sedative and start like flapping his arms around.
He's like walking away outside, and he hears him in the basement.
And I hadn't even realized until this point that the door that Annie uses to get down to the basement is a false door.
Yeah, it's a false door. It's a hidden door.
Yeah, that like you
hidden
push
farm
in.
door.
Yeah, and you like push it in and it pops out.
We haven't mentioned about Annie's house. I think this is a very charming house.
It's a cool house.
It's a very cute house.
Yeah, it's cool. Annie Wilkes, you know, she lives alone. She's got a big pig. A sow.
A big pig named Misery.
That she's named Misery. That's like a pet. It's got a big cowbell on its neck. And, you know, while Paul is in his room left to his own devices, Annie is in her bedroom with an open 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah. Is she watching the dating game?
She's watching the Love Connection.
Love Connection.
Love Connection with Chuck Woolery. And
I mean, definitely a moment that we can all relate to.
And a big bag of Cheetos or Doritos.
Just eating
Cheetos,
a big bag of Cheetos in bed.
A full 2-liter bottle of soda on the counter next to her.
A true mood.
I love it. And just watching the Love Connection. I mean, doesn't get any more 1990 than that, really.
Who is the host of Love Connection
Chuck
in
Woolery.
Okay.
We'll be back in 2 and 2. Yeah, Chuck Woolery has turned out to be kind of a weirdo. I think he was like a Trumper. I think he ended up being super right-wing weirdness. But, yeah. He hasn't been around lately, so whatever. F you, Chuck Woolery. But I remember watching The Love Connection, and it was actually fun. It was more fun when the dates were bad.
Sure.
Because they were just like, and he came, and like in the movie, the one in the movie, she said that he like wore like a t-shirt or something to a fancy restaurant. She said he didn't even wear a tie. And they went to a fancy restaurant, and he had like a mullet and a mustache. And I was like, oh, I love it.
He looked kind of cute though.
I would have dated him.
Yep.
He looked fine to me. Yeah, so just kind of talking about like Annie's house and her just like her life before Paul and even during, you know, Paul's captivity. But when the sheriff finds the false door, opens it, sees Paul
on the floor. Man, when you see that shotgun go through his chest.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
You're not going to murder this sweet old man.
I know. He did all this work.
Just kind of the shocking moment of this movie.
Fell in the snow. Yeah. I mean, a shocking moment of this movie up to this point.
Yeah.
Because the whole last scene is so... I mean, not the last scene, but like the big showdown is just wild and worth the price of admission and just so like... visceral, you know? It's
so kind of to set up the last act of this movie after the murder of this guy, that he's going to finish the book. He's written this whole novel just because he has nothing else to do but to type on this fucking typewriter.
Yeah.
So he finishes the novel.
Yeah.
He's going to do his ritual, and Annie pretty much has the suicide pact with them that they're both going to die together.
Well, she says, now that I shot this damn sheriff, other people are going to come.
Yep.
They're going to be looking for us. So there's only one way out.
And you know what? I'm taking you with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love when he has those moments of like, okay, I'm going to play along with this one.
Yeah.
And sometimes she's like, don't do that. I know that you don't believe that. But at this point, she's so far gone.
Yeah.
But she's just like,
he can kind of hook her along for the ride. Yep.
Because earlier, like at one point in the movie, she tells him, like, I love you. I'm in love with you. And she says, don't tell me you love me back because I know you're not. You know, I know you don't. But at this point, she's just like, well, this is the plan. Like, we got to die. Like, we have to. And he's just like, you're right.
It's some of
sweet.
It's some of Jimmy Caan's best work in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. The last scene when they're down in the basement and he's like, okay, let's do this. Yeah. And
how do you think Annie got a hold of that bottle of Dom?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did she just pick that up at like
that Dom Perignon?
Did she just pick that up at like
that general store?
At that little general store.
He's got like 2 bottles that he just has there forever. If one ever sells.
Because I'm assuming that Paul brought his own bottle to the lodge,
right?
And just say, "Here, hold this at the front desk."
Or
for
he's
me.
been doing this 8 times.
Sure.
Now.
So they know to get.
So they know
to get a bottle.
When Paul checks in, we got to get a bottle for him for the end of his stay.
I don't know. Maybe she went back to the restaurant.
But
I don't know.
Maybe when she decided you're going to write this book, she knew that his ritual was this. So I got this for, maybe that was in there somewhere. I got it for when you finish. So she just had it. Maybe she sent away for it. I don't know. How much does a bottle of Dom go for?
I remember when we were at Be Our Guest in Florida, the bottle of Dom, I think I was like quizzing you of how much it was.
Oh, at the table.
And at the restaurant, and it was around $700
at the table.
So probably
at a Disney restaurant.
So probably the markup for that, maybe you could get that retail for $200.
Sure,
$250
okay.
maybe
in 2021. All right, so in 1990, I'd venture to say you could get that bottle in Colorado for $90.
Sure,
let's just say.
And this was kind of at a time before like rappers started to drink it. That probably really upped the price of like Dom.
I remember seeing it like when I was a kid, seeing it at Costco.
Okay,
I remember that and be like, oh, that's cool. I know that's very fancy.
You probably can't get it at Costco anymore.
Probably
although
not.
I don't know, maybe you could.
Yeah. And well, I think the whole thing was just like you buy a bottle of Dom and then just like put it in your garage, and in 15 years you'll have a spoiled bottle of champagne. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, in my opinion, all champagne just tastes the same. Yeah. So might as well just get like a $7 bottle of Cook's.
I don't think you should be getting like a vintage Dom Perignon that's been in your garage from Costco. But at any rate, she breaks out the bottle of Dom P. And
so Paul kind of knows that his weapon is what he's been typing on.
Yeah.
Is this?
Yeah, he's got this book.
Is this heavy typewriter?
Oh, yes.
Of like, this is how I'm going to take this bitch out.
Yeah.
Is with the typewriter.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He lights the book on fire. Annie goes to kind of save it, and he just whacks her right over the head with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a very specific memory of watching this movie on VHS with my parents.
Okay.
When it first was released. And that specific shot, she walks in to the room and she has a champagne glass.
Yep.
And he's got the paper in his hand and the match in the other hand. And he's like,
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And she drops the champagne glass. And there's a close-up of the floor and the champagne glass shattering. And behind it, you see her shoes. And she's just wearing like those kind of like loafers, those like leather loafers where there's like a little like leather tassel.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? On the front of like where you put the penny in.
Those are such like old lady shoes. I love it.
Yes. Or like Catholic school like uniform shoes. But I always remember seeing, and I don't know how, like it wasn't even in like focus. But I remember as a kid seeing her shoes and just seeing the look on Kathy Bates's face as Annie and her acting and just being so like just the emotion that she had on her face to drop this glass, and she was just so like heartbroken. I felt bad for Annie Wilkes. And the whole time
that's what kind of makes this performance in this character interesting, is that you do kind of feel for her in those moments.
Yeah. But just seeing her shoes and being like, I know those shoes. Like she, like this is just a person who like went out and bought this pair of shoes, and I don't know, just seeing like a real thing that you like zero in on, and you're like, this is a person right now. And Kathy Bates was just able to telegraph that with this look on her face, and just like the way she's just like she loses it, and it gives way to this bitch fight.
Oh, this showdown is out of control. And it's one of those things that, like, damn, like, these two just really went for it. Like Kathy, I mean, she's kind of a bigger gal. Like, I mean, she was just down to just like get on the floor and just roll around with Jimmy Caan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
when he starts stuffing the burnt paper in her mouth.
Yeah. Eat it, you love it so much.
It would have been fun to see with an audience at the time.
Yeah, dude.
Like an audience full of gay men in like West Hollywood just like losing their damn mind at this scene.
Totally. I mean, that's the thing. It's like she has put Paul through so much that at this point he's just like, why won't you die?
Yeah, and it's just kind of that, and this is kind of where it really tips into horror.
Yeah,
because for the most part, the movie plays out as like a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
But this is some like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees. Why won't you die?
Yeah,
and you even get the. Be careful.
There's two.
Be careful.
Yeah,
this is when the killer is going to come for their one last scare.
Yeah. And that's what made Misery 2 so funny, because they did that like 3 times. Because there's 2 jumps in this. Like she hits her head on the typewriter, and it's that crazy like full body dummy that they use.
I always noticed the dummy as a kid, and it just used to just like
because the way that head hits that typewriter, you can't do a person. That can't be a person. That is like grotesque. But then after that, she gets up again. And he nails her with the doorstop. This like iron pig doorstop to the face.
Oh, just like these little household items in this woman's house that can be used as a weapon.
Yeah, I mean, she has like kept him hostage, forced him, to destroy a manuscript, forced him to like write a new one, shoots him up with all these drugs. Mangled his feet. I mean,
he's not really. I mean, he's lucky to be walking with a cane at the end of this movie.
Yeah. We talk about like how visceral this fight is, but when she hobbles him with that mallet, and she does both feet, it is wild. It's one of those movie scenes that just like. You remember that.
I mean, it's just burned. It's just burned into just movie history. Is that scene?
Yeah,
it's kind of just like one of the great scenes of horror movies too.
Yeah, it's like when you go to like a drive-in or something, and there's that like sizzle reel with like triumphant music and like movie film animated flying through space, and then there'll be like Gandalf the Wizard and like Dorothy.
It's gonna be like in like the AMC or Regal.
Yeah, just like wallpapered onto a wall.
I mean, it's going to be the shot of her with that knife.
Yeah.
So it's also just kind of interesting that Rob Reiner decided to change the material a little bit.
Right.
That she just like we have to do something else besides just cutting off a foot.
Well, I think cutting off. Okay, so
it probably logistics. It would have been too hard.
So
maybe.
So when you read the plot, not only does she chops off one foot. First of all, with an axe, and then she cauterizes it with a blowtorch.
Awesome.
I think that like in a movie, it might be that thing where it's like the character has just gone past the point of no return. Where like in this movie,
it kind of like, works in a book better than it would in a movie.
Like you're not on board with her obviously because she's the villain, but at least you're like, oh, but she's got this kooky house and she's kind of and it's Kathy Bates and blah blah blah. But I think maybe if you were to see that in a movie, you would just be like, nope, fuck this, I hate her, I'm out. And I think it's that. I think they have I think they probably thought the audience would have just dropped out.
Yeah, and it's just kind of easier to stage it and shoot it when you can have prosthetic legs and
Those
just have her
good prosthetic
and
legs.
just have her
like
and just kind of have her slam those feet. It probably just works a little easier for filming.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that scene's
wild. Pretty gnarly.
It's insane. Yeah, there's a lot of really good classic shots, but yeah, her holding that knife, that big old knife. Yeah, really really good iconic shots in this movie. But yeah, you're right. It's become like part of like cinema,
Yeah, I mean,
well deserved.
Annie's just an iconic character. I mean, there's so many just like there's so many just things going on with this character. She's psychotic. She's delusional. She's hypermanic. She's depressive. She's bipolar. Severe personality disorders, and sadomasochism. Like, there's so much going on in this role.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you read the actresses who they wanted to. And I've read interviews with Anjelica Huston that she was offered it and she turned it down to do The Grifters. And they were both in Best Actress together in 1990. Could you see Anjelica Huston in this role?
I can see Anjelica Huston in this role, but I like the fact that Kathy Bates is like a short woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like Anjelica Huston's almost too imposing.
There's not anything threatening about Kathy Bates.
Anjelica Huston's too imposing as a woman. She's tall, so I feel like, I don't know. Maybe I would see the character a little differently. But seeing Kathy Bates, she on the outside, she just looks like a nerdy, frumpy little lady. But Anjelica Huston, with the right light and the right makeup and the right this and that, can look kind of menacing. You know, she's quite beautiful, but she can also look menacing. And Kathy Bates doesn't look menacing at all, in her face or in her like demeanor or character. It's all the acting, you know, it's all the backstory.
I was also reading Bette Midler was offered the role and she turned it down, and Midler later said that the decision to turn down the role was stupid. Could you have seen Bette Midler in this role? That would have been out of control.
It would have been crazy.
That would have just almost veered into like SNL sketch territory.
Yeah, because I feel, especially at that time in Bette's career.
Yeah, it's kind of doing all of these big studio comedies for
very
Touchstone.
Broad comedies. I don't know. It would have been.
It would have been a big departure. I mean,
it would have been a big.
I guess she could have done it. She's a good actress.
I'm sure she could have handled it, but yeah, it's funny when you talk about like just everything psychologically that one could diagnose Annie with. It's just like that scene when Mr. Burns went to the doctor and he's like, "You have everything.
Yeah,
you have every single disease, and they're all balancing each other out,
and it's all keeping you alive.
You have everything." Yeah, every sort of psychological, affliction in the book. You could say that Annie Wilkes has just a touch, just a touch of that. Yeah, I mean the final showdown between the two, and again, it's one of those things that, like you said, Paul Sheldon is, if he's not in a bed, he's in a wheelchair in the same room as the bed.
Yeah,
this whole movie, he only has two scenes, like one scene in the office, one scene driving the car, and one scene in a restaurant.
Rob Reiner, in the kind of the bonus materials, kind of jokes that whenever he would direct Jimmy Caan, he would always just start out everything of, "All right, Jimmy, you're in bed." You're in bed for this scene.
Oh man! But the final showdown, it's in the room. It's in the room next to the bed, next to the card table, all that. So it's just, I don't know. It's so fitting that it's and the sheriff's just dead at the bottom of the basement, and the phone maybe works, maybe doesn't. It's like is he just waiting there for the cops? Who knows? Because it just cuts to him in a suit, in an Armani suit, hobbling his way down Fifth Avenue.
Yeah,
meeting Lauren Bacall, meeting Betty.
The ending is very like Carrie. Of kind of here's our one last scare, and also just kind of hints at the post traumatic stress.
Right.
Like, is he seeing Annie like every day?
Yeah,
just whenever he just goes out of his apartment.
And the server who he sees and initially sees Annie, but then he sees that it's a different woman, and she says, "Are you Paul Sheldon?" He says, "Yes." She says, "I'm your biggest fan." And you're like, "All right." But I love when Lauren Bacall is just like, "All right, you've written this new novel and it's a hit.
How about some nonfiction
and some High Point coffee?" How about some nonfiction, and how about maybe talking about your ordeal? And he's just like, "Yeah, fuck no, never in a million years." He's just like, "Nope," shuts it down, never. and it just kind of ends there. Yeah, you're right though. It is very, very Carrie in its ending with the final scare. But Paul's walking around. He's got a cane, but he's walking. It's like he was able to recover. Annie, I'm sorry. I was going to say Kathy Bates. Annie Wilkes says at one point in the movie, "You were born on such and such date 45 years ago."
Well, when he asks her about kind of the Farnsworth asks her about, do you know any information on Paul Sheldon? Mm-hmm. She pretty much just gives him a mini Wikipedia summary.
Right. But that's kind of a funny scene too, because he's like, he's obviously, it's an investigation. He's like, what can you tell me about Paul Sheldon? And she's like, well, he was born on blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But the character of Paul Sheldon is 45, a mere 2 years older than myself.
Yeah. You better. I mean, Pete, it's not too late to start your romance novels.
Well, not only that, I feel like James Caan in this movie can fucking box me like
can pound you through the window,
punt me like a throw me like a javelin. Yeah, James Caan, I feel like not underrated, but maybe underrecognized for this movie. Like we said, Sonny Corleone, man, The Godfather. His filmography is interesting.
Sure.
His filmography is very interesting. I mean, we don't necessarily have to play this game, but do you think you could name his most known for?
I mean, I was going to do Kathy Bates for you.
Okay, well, we'll do that. And you give me Jimmy Caan right now.
Okay, so, I mean, Godfather is definitely going to be there.
Yeah.
Misery is going to be there.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, fuck.
One of them, I have no idea what it is, but maybe you will.
Can you give me a hint on the other two? I mean, I can't think. I'm blanking on James Caan movies. What are the years?
So one of them is from 2003, and it also stars Lauren Bacall.
Also stars Lauren Bacall. What was Lauren Bacall doing in 2003?
It has got a who's who of Hollywood, and I think it's one of those things where they're just like, I need to work with
this director. Is it I mean, it's not a Clint Eastwood movie.
It's not a Clint Eastwood movie.
Lauren Bacall later went on to do Birth in 2004, so it's definitely not that. I have no idea.
It's got another Best Actress winner from Australia,
Nicole Kidman.
Yes.
2003. Oh, Cold Mountain? No. I mean, Lauren Bacall's not in Cold Mountain.
No. There's no furniture in this movie.
Oh, it's Dogville.
It's Dogville.
Dogville is in Jimmy Caan's most known for. That's so interesting.
How about that? Yeah. And there's one more from 1981 that I'm not super familiar with.
I mean, I'm definitely not going to get that.
Yeah. It's called Thief.
Oh, sure. It's a Michael Mann movie.
Michael Mann, yeah.
Sure. I know Thief.
Willie Nelson.
Yep.
Jim Belushi.
All right. So let's see if you can get Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates is pretty... They're 4 heavy hitter Kathy Bates movies, so I think you can get it.
So I'm going to go Misery.
Misery's there, yeah.
Fried Green Tomatoes?
Fried Green Tomatoes not there.
It's not there. No. Dolores Claiborne.
Dolores Claiborne's there.
Liz Claiborne.
A really good performance, and I'm surprised that didn't get more awards attention.
Never saw it.
Great. We should watch it one of these evenings.
Okay, so another Kathy Bates.
You got 2 more
joints. So, gosh, Fried Green Tomatoes is not on there. Okay,
kind of surprised that it's not.
Yeah, me too. I'm very surprised that it's not. All right, so she's also in.
One of them is Oscar nominated.
The Waterboy.
No, this is not The Water. Should have been Oscar nominated.
Okay. Oh gosh.
One of them is a movie that we have covered on this podcast, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, okay. And Kathy Bates is in it.
Kathy Bates is in it.
And it's one of
A role that Reba McEntire turned down.
Titanic!
It's her Molly Brown in Titanic. She's so good in Titanic.
Yes.
The fourth one is a movie that I don't know if you like this director, so I don't know if you've seen it.
Okay.
But it did nominate her for an Oscar. I don't really think that she was that close of winning this year, but she was nominated for it.
I'm assuming it was supporting.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh. What year is it?
2002.
Ooh. Not helpful.
I don't think I don't think that you're a fan of this director.
All
It is
right.
Alexander Payne.
Yeah.
It's about Schmidt.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Didn't see About Schmidt.
And the big thing with About Schmidt when that movie came out, all of the press for that movie is that Kathy Bates gets naked in the hot tub.
Oh,
that
that's
was like
right.
the number one thing that they led with.
Yes,
which
you're
is
absolutely right.
Which is just sort of just such a disservice to just Kathy Bates.
So
Just
whack.
like she's so much better of an actress just to sort of kind of zero in just on that scene of the movie.
Yeah, totally.
I'm glad that we got to a Kathy Bates movie on the podcast. I love Kathy Bates. She's one of my favorite actresses. And like I mentioned before, I think that her performance in this movie is one of my all-time favorite roles of all time.
Yes, absolutely.
And like I said, one of my favorite Best Actress wins. Just because I think it's so cool that a role like this was that widely recognized.
Right. Because because like we said, it had a lot of baggage. You know, Stephen King, people just think it's a horror movie, right? And maybe Academy voters in 1990 were just like, no, I'm not going to, you know.
And especially the narrative that Kathy Bates was not a household name going into this movie. And this movie just made her...
Yes. Made her a household name.
It made her a household name.
Yeah. You know, and also she wasn't quite... an ingenue?
No.
Right.
She was just a woman in her 40s.
Yeah. So it's unusual, but it just kind of shows it like the right role. It's the right girl, the right hair.
I mean,
right
it's like Michael Kors says on Project Runway. And I think that just Kathy Bates's filmography, she's done movies, she's done television. She was really great on 6 Feet Under, like very cleverly cast always on a show like American Horror Story.
Right.
That's just not really an actress that I would have pegged to have work with Ryan Murphy.
Yeah, totally.
But just Ryan Murphy is a smart homosexual that knows how to cast these roles.
Yeah, it was probably just like, I want to work with her. And she's obviously great. Rob Reiner followed up this movie with A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men,
yeah.
Rob Reiner's had a weird career of that, like, there definitely comes to a point where Rob Reiner kind of, after sort of the early 2000s, Rob Reiner's directed a lot of bad movies.
Yeah. I mean, probably, you know, after... Gosh, yeah.
He did like an LBJ movie a few years ago that you're just like, does this movie actually exist?
Yeah, I mean, there's things like Rumor Has It.
Yeah, I mean, and also a movie like Rumor Has It, there was a lot of buzz going into that movie of that. This is Jen's first big movie when she left Friends. It's about the making of The Graduate.
Yeah.
And it came out and just
Shirley MacLaine
was terrible.
Yeah. Alex and Emma. What is that?
Alex and Emma
is that a real movie?
Alex and Emma is bad.
Yeah.
The Story of Us with Bruce Willis and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
In that movie, a movie like American Beauty just sort of stomped into the ground. Oh, you wanted a movie about a failing marriage in 1999?
Right. Here you go.
And nobody talks about The Story of Us.
Right.
Probably released within a month of each other.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Ghosts of Mississippi, I remember as...
I know a lot of people like The American President.
Right, yeah.
Roger Ebert said that North was like the worst movie that he'd ever seen.
Yes.
When that came out.
Yeah, North.
But Rob Reiner just kind of...
There's not really like a Rob Reiner style.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of worked in all sorts of genres.
Yeah. And I think his most successful things, I mean, When Harry Met Sally to me is like,
yeah, it's
come
a
on,
pretty. It's
come
like
on.
a borderline.
Flawless.
It's a borderline perfect movie.
Yeah, flawless. I think he's really good. Like that and Princess Bride to me just have these like funny nostalgia factors. So great. Misery and Stand By Me are able to go in the complete opposite end. But
I always kind of forget that I'm a little too young to have watched a show like All in the Family.
Yeah.
Like whenever that was on reruns, that
Yeah.
was an old person show that
Yeah,
I had no
totally.
business watching.
Totally.
But I mean, he broke out of the television box that a lot of actors found themselves in. It was kind of him, Penny Marshall, and Ron Howard.
Yeah.
That just sort of came from network sitcoms.
Yeah, well, they're
and
on the same crew, too.
And
Yeah.
built very successful directing careers for each other.
Yes. Yeah. And you still kind of don't see that too much, you know?
A little bit with Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie on its own, it really does stand on its own. It's scary. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
It has like some really funny stuff in it.
Yeah,
The
there's
performances are just
there's some great
so
kind of
rounded.
notes of humor in this
Yeah.
very dark story.
Yeah.
And I mean, us gays just kind of love Annie Wilkes. Like, we love how crazy this broad is.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's an icon. She's the moment. But and we love Kathy Bates. Just killing it as this character. So good. So I mean, yeah, it's all around. It's a very well-rounded movie, and I feel like I should be watching it more.
Well, I mean,
I feel like
we bought the we bought the Shout Factory edition of it, so we have a nice copy of it on Blu-ray.
I'd like to watch each and every one of those special features, and they're all very like they're not like 2-3 minute. I hate that when the special features are like there's 10 featurettes and they're each 1 minute long.
We didn't even finish the new Shout Factory interview with Rob Reiner because it's like an hour long.
Yeah,
because
like
you know that
48
Rob
minutes.
Reiner is someone that they probably went in there thinking that they're going to get 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and Rob Reiner gave them like an hour and a half that they had to trim down to like 55 minutes.
Totally. But yeah, there's a lot of good supplemental features on this. Thank you so much, Shout Factory. They do such good work.
I mean,
over
you
there making
can
these movies.
thank our past guest on the show because I think that he produced this.
Oh yeah, that one guy,
Jeff.
I know.
Jeff from the Fan.
I know. She didn't say his name, so I was like, "Oh yeah,
Jeffrey Mixed.
He's great." Yeah, he works with Shout Factory, well, Scream Factory.
Yeah, he produces all of the Scream Factory editions.
So if you can get your hands on a copy of that, if possible,
It's always on and off streaming platforms too.
it is always on and off streaming. So yeah, we always recommend giving this movie a watch. It's worth the rewatch. It's so great.
Kind of an unexpected pick for October that I don't really see a lot of people posting that they're watching Misery, but I'd like to see it more.
Well, there's not like a Misery maze at like Halloween Horror Nights or anything, so maybe there should be.
There should be like an Annie Wilkes walkthrough at Not Scary Farm.
Yeah,
I feel like
I'm
Not
saying.
Scary Farm is kind of a little more in line of just like Annie Wilkes in general.
Yeah.
I think that Annie would frequent Knott's more than say like
she's
Universal
totally,
Studios.
She's totally a Knott's Berry Farm gal.
Yep.
She loves the boysenberry.
Yep.
Yeah, it's right up her alley.
She has that season pass.
Oh boy! I mean, this has been. I could continue talking about Misery, but I think we should probably wrap it up. We've been talking about this for quite a while now, but I think since we have no guest to say goodbye to this evening, that means it's time. Do you know what it's time for?
Patreon shoutouts.
It's time for some Patreon shoutouts. Oh, my goodness. You guys, thank you for sticking around this long during our Misery episode, but we would love to say hey, and hello to some of our awesome patrons, including Travis, Esperanza, Nicole, Susan, Barry, JJ, Brandon, Leighton, Shelley, Merle, Charlie, Heather, Paul, Jamie, Drew, Jimmy, Genevieve, Dawn, Josh, Emily, Aaron, Melinda, Jim, Jessica, Nick and Shannon, Christine, and Rufino.
Thanks so much, guys.
As always, head over to patreon.com/movies that made us gay for some extra special additional content. We just dropped our Nightmare on Elm Street 1 commentary track.
Yeah.
You can check that out. That's lots of fun.
We also just did Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, so we're doing a few this month.
Yes, indeed. We'll probably get one out very shortly in a week or two to have another one for October, just to have some extra additional.
We're watching movies. Why not?
Yes, indeed. We're watching them anyway. So, like I said, patreon.com/movies that made us gay. We'd also love it if you'd rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts.
Give us 5 stars.
Yeah.
Helps with that mysterious Apple traction of when shows show up in people's feeds.
Yes, indeed. Oh, and we have a new review.
Yay.
New 5-star review.
Do you want to read it?
Sure, I'll read it. This 5-star review is from Apple Podcasts listeners Jermel B. The title of this review is My 10-Year-Old Self is Enjoy Overload. Way back in the 1980s, my uncle made me a VHS tape with The Neverending Story, Legend, and Return of the Jedi.
Oh my God. What a lineup.
That is a great tape.
What a great tape. I would have watched the shit out of that.
Yeah.
Out of that tape.
I watched it so much I could quote entire scenes from any one of those movies. Listening to this podcast is like being 10 again and curling up on the couch with a bag of Twizzlers and my Buddy doll for another solo watch party. Only this time it's watching with a group of friends who also long to run off into the sunset hand in hand with Tom Cruise while Tangerine Dream plays in the background. If anyone asks, I would highly recommend they take a sip from the MTMUG. Empty mug. You won't regret it. See what they did there?
Yeah.
Empty mug.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
That review is incredible. And also another sign that we need to do Legend on the show.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed.
I know that Legend is a very divisive movie for some that did not grow up on it, but I also used to watch it a lot as a kid.
I mean, it's got 20-year-old Tom Cruise?
Mm-hmm.
Get out of here. We'll watch it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you so much, Apple Podcast listener, Jermel B. You're awesome. So why don't you write us a review, guys, since you heard that one. So head on over to Apple Podcasts and write us a review. It's free, it's cheap, it's easy. It costs you nothing, and it helps us out a lot. And we'll read it on the show. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Movies That Made Us Gay, and we're on Twitter
at MTMUGPod.
Yes, indeed. And my name is Pete. I am on Instagram and Twitter at Peter Lasagna.
And I'm Oscar Scott on Twitter and Scott Youngballer on Instagram.
Awesome. Until next time, everybody, thank you so much for listening.
Ooh, we have a really good movie next week and a really funny guest. I'm excited for it.
Yay.
Yep.
All right, tune in, everybody. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.